The MAC moves from 12 to 13 by expanding into the Northeast with the UMass Minutemen. UMass Amherst has over 30,000 enrollment, a $1.3 billion endowment, and is ranked number 67 in U.S. News. Their football stadium has a 17,000 capacity and underwent a $34.5 million renovation in 2014, which added a football performance center. The Mullins Center opened in 1993 at a $51 million construction cost and has a 9,493 capacity for basketball. In the span of 15 years, everything has come full circle, as in 2011, it was announced that UMass would join the MAC for football only. UMass was supposed to be number 14 in football to Temple's number 13, but Temple would end up leaving for the Big East, which later became the American, before UMass ever even played a game, and that would leave the MAC with 13 football teams. UMass would be a football-only member of the MAC from 2012 through 2015, and in 2014, the MAC would eject UMass as a football-only member, effective after the 2015 season, as the MAC executed a clause in the contract to offer UMass full membership, or else their football-only affiliation would be terminated. UMass elected to reject that offer and decided to stay in the A-10 while shifting football to independence. And now, a decade later, UMass has announced that it will join the MAC as a full member, and UMass will be a full member of the MAC effective 2025. Using the Sportico database and looking at athletic revenues, UMass would lead the MAC in athletic revenues by a landslide, as they have $58.4 million. That's $17 million higher than second place, which is Western Michigan at $41.2 million. But also note that UMass, Western Michigan, Miami, and Bowling Green play D1 hockey, which inflates their athletic revenues. In terms of football expenses, UMass would be third in the MAC, trailing only Buffalo and Toledo. UMass has $11.2 million in football expenses. In regards to football coaching compensation, UMass is right in the middle of the pack of the MAC. Toledo is first, followed by Buffalo, Kent, Western Michigan, Central Michigan, Miami, and then UMass. For men's basketball expenses, UMass would lead the MAC at $5.83 million. They would be followed by Buffalo, Ohio, Akron, and Toledo. For men's basketball coaching compensation, UMass would be second, just slightly behind Buffalo. They would be ahead of Toledo, who would be third, Akron, who would be fourth, and Ohio, who would round out the top five. So UMass would be first in athletic revenues, third in football expenses, and first in men's basketball expenses, and then seventh in football coaching compensation, and second in men's basketball coaching compensation. Now, using the same Sportico database and looking at each school's ticket sales, donations, licensing/advertisements, and then adding those three categories up for a total called self-generated revenue, which is a term I made up, Western Michigan's $7.53 million in self-generated revenue would lead the MAC, followed by Toledo at $6.1 million, and then UMass would round out the top three at $5.49 million. If we go to the top row, ticket sales, UMass has $1.76 million in ticket revenue, which would be second in the MAC, trailing only Toledo. In the second row, donor contributions, UMass has $2.81 million, which would be fourth in the MAC, trailing only Western Michigan, Toledo, and Bowling Green. In the third row, licensing and advertising, UMass's $0.92 million would rank fifth in the MAC, trailing Western Michigan, Kent State, Miami, and Ohio. And of course, UMass would rank third once you total those three categories together. But also note that UMass, Western Michigan, Miami, and Bowling Green once again play D1 hockey, so that's going to give them an advantage in these categories. As everyone can figure out, basketball clearly was not a factor in this decision, as in net rankings, the A-10 ranks 8th, behind the Big East, Pac-12, and Mountain West, and ahead of the MVC, American, and West Coast, while the MAC ranks 24th, behind America East, where UMass Lowell is, the Big Sky, and the Metro Atlantic, and ahead of the Summit League, ASUN, and Southland. And here's a graph looking at the number of NCAA tournament bids since the turn of the century between the A-10 and MAC. The MAC has been a one-bid league every year in the 21st century, while the A-10 has been a one-bid league only 3 times and only once since 2005. That said, it could happen again this year, which would make back-to-back years. And something to note is if you look at 2014, which was the year UMass decided to stay with the A-10 and reject the MAC's offer of full membership, or else their football team would get kicked out of the league. That year, the A10 had 6 bids. Fast forward 10 years, and the A10 is coming off a 1 bid year, and we'll see what happens this year. So the A10 going from a 3+ bid league every year from around 2008 to 2018 to a 1 or 2 bid league every year since 2019 likely changed the calculus a bit for UMass. Another factor to look at is the NCAA tournament unit split. The A10 reportedly applies a 75-25 split to NCAA tournament units, where the school that earned the unit keeps 75%, and then the remaining 25% gets distributed among everyone else in the conference. So therefore, UMass would get 1/56th of a unit, or 1.8% of a unit. Whereas if the MAC splits their NCAA tournament units among 14 schools, I'm assuming the MAC would add a 14th school, then UMass would get 1/14th of a unit, which is 7.2% of a unit. So if UMass doesn't make the NCAA tournament, the value of an A10 unit is 1/4 of the value of a MAC unit. Now, of course, the A10 earns significantly more units than the MAC. Over the past 10 tournaments, the A10 earned 49 units in comparison to the MAC's 13 units. And UMass earned, I believe, one of those 49 units. So all that to say, the A10 is a massive advantage if you are the school who is earning those units. But if you're not earning those units, UMass probably is not making more revenue off A10 units than MAC units. Now, looking at TV contracts by evaluating each league's Form 990, on the A10's Form 990 that they submitted, under the television and multimedia line, they reported $5.7 million. You divide that up by 15 schools, and that comes out to be $380,000 per school. However, the A10 signed a new TV contract, which goes into effect this upcoming year and lasts through the 2028-2029 school year. And the A10 press release claimed a 40% increase in rights fee revenue. So we take that $380,000 and multiply it by 140%, and that comes out to be $532,000 per school. Now we delve into the MAC's Form 990, and under the line MAC Television, they report $9.7 million. Divide that by 14 schools, as we're assuming a 14th would be added, and that's $692,000 per school. However, the MAC's TV contract expires after the 2026-2027 school year, and obviously the MAC's next TV contract is unknown, but it is likely to increase. Therefore, we take that $692,000 per school in the MAC and subtract that $532,000 per school in the A10, and that's a difference of $160,000 with an increase likely. Now we look at CFP payouts by looking at the MAC's Form 990. Under the line college football playoff, the MAC reported $15.5 million. Divide that by 14 schools, assuming the MAC adds a 14th, and that comes out to be $1.1 million per school. That $1.1 million should be potentially increasing for the next CFP contract, assuming there's no P2 or P4 breakaway. Now, bringing all that together, you have the $532,000 in the A10's TV contract, and then with the MAC, UMass would be making $692,000 under the current TV contract, with a bump expected in 2027, and then $1.1 million in the CFP contract, with a bump expected in 2026. So that's $1.8 million plus whatever bumps they end up getting in the next contracts. So this decision is purely follow the money for UMass, although there is some risk, and that risk in joining the MAC is that there will be some type of P2 or P4 breakaway in the future. Regarding MAC expansion, since we logically expect there will be a number 14, UConn joining for football only, that likelihood is near zero, as UConn's future home schedules, they have 3 P4 home games in 26 and 27 apiece. And then it also comes down to branding for UConn. UConn doesn't want to relegate itself to a lower group of 5. As with UMass, the MAC is likely eyeing strategic expansion into the east or south. Logically, Plan A would be Western Kentucky, as the MAC pursued Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee as a pair in 2021, but Middle Tennessee rejected. And if Western Kentucky turns them down, I would expect Plan B to be Delaware, as the MAC would be banking on Delaware desiring a conference affiliation with UMass and Buffalo. I would be really surprised if the MAC pursues any sort of expansion in the Midwest. as any sort of Midwestern expansion, would it give the MAC something that they don't already have?